Hello, my name is Judy Callens, and I am superintendent and principal of the Heartland School. And I'm here today with Susan McGrath, vice chair of our school board. She has presented another fantastic overview of the proposed budget, and we are doing this so that people who are unable to attend our annual school district meeting on Monday night have access to the information. Take it away,
Thank you,
Sue.
Judy. We're going to start with an overview of the topics that will be covered at our annual school district meeting, which is next Monday. Most of the slides that are in the presentation today result from questions that we've gotten from the community or serve to provide an overview of the budget and also to provide some information about changes that we see in the budget, trends and their effects in the budget. And so I will go through a number of different slides and talk about some numbers with you. If there are questions after you see this presentation, please feel free to call the school and ask for clarification, because our hope is to inform the community as well as possible. So next slide, Judy. So the process that we followed this year for the budget development is the same as what we followed last year. We hosted a community forum in the fall to request questions from the community about the budget process, about the budget specifically. We put together a list of those questions and tried to address them in this presentation. Then the administration gets requests from the staff for budget items, puts together rates and projections from various vendors, from the supervisory union, from the school, and also numbers that we get from the state about, for instance, tax rates and so on. And the administration, which is primarily Judy, who is involved in this process, puts together the first draft. The Budget Advisory Committee, which is chaired by a member of the school board, which is me this year, and also has community members and administration members on it, reviews the draft budget and adjusts it as necessary, and tries to address issues that come up from the forum and other venues where we get questions from the community. We went through 11 drafts of the budget this year before we presented it to the board, and the board reviewed recommendations made by the Budget Advisory Committee, made some additional changes to the budget, and then is now presenting it through this venue to you, the community, for your review. And next week you'll have the opportunity to vote on that budget. The articles for community consideration this year, the primary one is to approve a budget of $7,980,711. We also have a request to move $115,309 in carryover funds from the fiscal year 08 to the Capital Reserve Fund, and approve the use of $38,000 from the Capital Reserve Fund for energy efficient lighting, $37,000 from Capital Reserve for parking lot paving, and $10,000 for a paging system. Now I'd like to discuss in more detail the Capital Reserve articles one by one. The first, $115,309. Actually, this is the carryover money from FY08. Not the use of the Capital Reserve Fund, but this is money that we are requesting to put into the Capital Reserve Fund. There was $315,309 of carryover from FY08. $200,000 of that money has been approved by the board to apply to the fiscal year 10 budget, which is the current budget under consideration. And we're asking that the remaining $115,309 be placed in the Capital Reserve Fund for future use of capital projects. The first Capital Reserve article, we're asking for $38,000 to be used for energy efficient lighting upgrades. Previously, the school did sort of a first installment of energy efficient lighting in the school, and this money would be used to complete those projects. There are a number of different grants that we're looking at to, that would help to pay for this lighting as well. And we're looking at a return on investment of 2 to 3 years. And of course, we would see a greater savings in electricity if we were to install all of these lights, which is energy efficiency in the school is something that we're trying to take very seriously. The second Capital Reserve article is $37,000 for parking lot paving. This request is for the parking lot that is on the side of the school where the buses drop the children off in the morning and where parents drop off and pick up their kids in the morning and in the afternoon. This parking lot was not heavily used in previous years, but in the last couple of years we've needed to make some safety motivated changes in the way we do drop off and pick up. The result has been that this lot has been used constantly throughout the day, and a lot of the dirt and debris that's getting kicked up because this is a dirt parking lot is entering the school and getting into the heating system and the ventilation system, and also causing some other maintenance issues. So we're asking that this lot be paved. This particular item has been on the list of things to do at the school for a number of different years and has been pushed down the list each year as other priorities took over. And the board feels it's very important at this point to take care of this issue. It has been an ongoing issue, and the importance has been increasing, especially with the change in our vehicular traffic in that area. So we're hoping to get that parking lot paved. Next one, Judy. The final one is to approve $10,000 from the Capital Reserve Fund for replacement of the paging system. The current communication system in the school dates back to 1972. The system does not work in many of the classrooms. We've had several lightning strikes at the school which have affected this communication system, and it needs to be replaced so that we can have a mechanism of communicating throughout the school in case of emergencies. And so this is a high priority as far as the board is concerned at this time. If all three of these articles are passed, and if the community agrees to put the $115,000 of carryover funds from FY08 into the Capital Reserve Fund, we would still have approximately $190,000 left in the Capital Reserve Fund, again, after all of these projects are completed. So we think that that's a pretty healthy amount to have in the Capital Reserve Fund after fiscal year 10. There are lots of projections and rates that go into making the budget each year, and some of them are calculated by the state, such as the number of equalized pupils, the common level of appraisal, and your tax rate. Others are projections based on information that we get from people that we pay for services, vendors such as our cost for oil, propane, and so on and so forth, the cost of tuition for high schools, insurance companies for our liability insurance, and so on. Some of these rates and costs change after the budget is voted on by the local community. For instance, the tax rate last year changed after the town meeting date and resulted in a different tax rate than what the board and the administration projected that tax rate would be. Therefore, we just want to make sure that the community understands that the budget is a best estimate. It cannot be precisely calculated, and that the administration and the board does its very best to make sure that we have accurate numbers at the time that it's presented at town meeting and the time that the community votes on the budget. Our budget has been within 2% to 3% of the estimated value over the past several years, so we think that we're doing a pretty good job of giving you that very best estimate. For the fiscal year 10 budget, there are a number of projections and rates that I've listed here, including the excess spending threshold, which I'll discuss in a minute. Also the maximum inflation rate spending cap. Those are two things that are limits on the per pupil spending that are imposed by state law. And I will talk about each one of those limits and how we're doing as far as staying under those limits in just a minute. Also included in this budget are the number of equalized pupils. The common level of appraisal, you can see that that's 96.61%, which is slightly less than last year. The ideal CLA for a town would be about 100%, which would mean that houses are selling in the town for their approximate assessed value, and we're slightly below that at this point. The tax rates that I've shown here, 0.86 residential, $1.35 for non-residential. These rates have been proposed by the Ways and Means Committee and have yet to make it all the way through the legislature. So these things are still up in the air. and there are some other increases there that I'll show you in the budget in just a minute. So the excess spending costs, this is an Act 130 limit that we cannot spend more than a certain amount per year on our students, or we end up paying a penalty for that. For Heartland in the 2009-10 school year, that limit is $12,621. So this number is $1,363 below the per pupil excess spending threshold for Heartland, which is $13,984. So we are below the excess spending threshold and will not have to pay a penalty for going over that number. The second vote law, which pertains to Act 82, this is the first fiscal year that Act 82, the second vote law part of Act 82 goes into effect. This law establishes a maximum inflation amount that limits the amount of money that can be spent, that can be requested in a single article on town meeting day. The maximum inflation amount, or MIA, is based on the New England Consumer Price Index, which for this year was announced to be 2.9%, and then 1% is added to that number. If the cap is exceeded for each town, then the budget has to be presented in multiple articles. For Heartland, the maximum per pupil spending cap for FY10 is $13,327. Our actual rate under this calculation was $13,178, which is $149 per pupil underneath the cap. And therefore, we can present our budget to the community or the articles for consideration in a single article rather than breaking it down into the amount that goes up to the limit, and then anything over that would need to be presented as a second article. So again, we're under the cap as far as this article is concerned. Student enrollment trends. So here I've listed the K through 8 and 9 through 12 populations. This is enrollment for the school, so these are the actual numbers that we've had in each one of the classrooms. I've listed 2007 through 2010. The 2010 numbers are, again, a projection because we don't know how many students we'll end up with exactly. And the 2009 numbers that are listed there were the record as of January of this year. The thing to note here, I think, is that we are having a declining population in the town of Heartland. We have seen our numbers dip a little more than 50 students from 2007 to what we're projecting in 2010. The board is keeping an eye on this because we may reach a point where we could make some more effective use of the staff in the school by moving some children around to different classrooms at some point if the population reaches a certain level. But at this point, the difference in the population amongst all the classrooms does not allow that. So we need to have the staff that we have there in the school right now. We're also seeing, this year we saw a much larger kindergarten class. It was a 40-plus student class, and there's a projection that we would see an increase again next year in our kindergarten population. The administration is trying to gather those numbers right now, but the projection is that we'll have another large class. If that trend continues, then we will see the population increase again over time. So the board and the administration, again, are keeping our eyes out for what's going on with the population in the school. Another thing to look at is high school tuition rates. This is a big part of our budget because we tuition our children out to various high schools. Here we've listed the schools that our students go to: Hartford, Windsor, Woodstock, Hanover, Thetford, and some private schools. By far the majority of our students go to Hartford High School, and that was in this current fiscal year, the FY09. And the rate for that high school, for Hartford High School, for this year is $10,300. The rate that has been announced for next year is $11,300. This is a 9.7% increase and is the largest increase that we're seeing across all of the high schools that we tuition out to. Windsor is looking at a 4% increase, Woodstock 3.2%, Hanover 1.7%, and Thetford 9.3%. The private school increase in tuition, allowed tuition, the portion that the town pays, is 5.69%. one of the things that we got to wondering in preparing the budget is why we were seeing increases in this range in our high school tuitions. And so we started looking at the same sorts of trends that we see in Heartland with our declining population. And on the next slide, you can see that the high schools are also seeing a decline in population. In Hartford, going from 2007 to 2008, they had a drop of 7.9%, Windsor 3.1%, and Woodstock 3.0%. So as population declines, the cost per pupil increases, and this is being reflected in the high school tuitions that we're seeing proposed to us from the other schools. Just to note that this is a statewide effect that I noted when going through all the data, that there is in general a population decrease throughout the whole state, both elementary, middle, and high school levels. On the rate and trends slide here, it's a comparison from each fiscal year looking at the total budget, the number of equalized pupils that we have, which is not the same as the enrollment. The way that equalized pupils are calculated has to do with various aspects of the population of the school and is not equal to the actual number of children that we have in our school. We are also looking here at the CLA, the common level of appraisal, and the tax rate that results based on the budget, the CLA, and the cost per pupil that we put into the budget. The graph below shows that a few years ago in FY06 and FY07, we had some factors that changed quite a bit, and this caused a lot of consternation amongst the administration, the board, and the community, because some of the numbers were fluctuating a lot, like the CLA and the tax rate were changing. And there were a couple things that were affecting this. One is that there was a reappraisal done in the town, so this affected both the CLA and the tax rate quite a bit. We've also seen some changes in our spending and in the equalized pupils, but in FY09 and FY10, you can see that the statistics that are listed there are changing a lot less rapidly. So hopefully what's happening is that we're approaching a stable level with our tax rate, our CLA, and our spending adjustments, although we really don't have control over things like the tax rate here at the local level. But we're trying to do our best to maintain control over the things that we can control locally, and that we're hoping that that's reflected not only in those statistics and the variation declining in them, but also in the confidence in the community in our school budget and our ability to provide an excellent education very effectively for our kids. The proposed budget, this slide shows how it was composed. So the percentages that are shown on the right-hand side of this slide are the percent that each one of those categories represents of the budget total. So this is not an increase or a decrease for next year. This is how much percentage of the budget this item represents. So for instance, wages, and the percentage that's shown there is 35.9%. What that means is that the wages that are in our budget account for 35.9% of the total budget number, which is $7.9 million. The benefits represent 13.4% of the total budget, and so on. You can also see there that the tuition represents a very large chunk of our budget. It's 34%, while other categories are under, there are several categories that are under 5% of the total budget. But wages and tuition and benefits remain the three largest components of the budget. So when we look at cost-cutting measures and trying to be efficient, those are the areas that we sort of hone in on in our discussions and trying to figure out whether we're doing the best job we can at providing the services that we need at a cost-effective rate. The changes in the budget are shown here on this slide. So the right-hand column shows the difference in terms of a percentage between the budget last year, which is the current fiscal year that we're in, and the proposed budget for next year. You can see that wages, there's a proposed 1.58% increase in the wages overall. The benefits rate is projected to go down by 8.3%. This is largely due to some changes. One, in healthcare costs, there's a 0% increase proposed for next year from the healthcare system that we use. And some of our disability payments, insurance payments, have gone down this year depending on the category of employee that you're looking at. And so the reduction in those costs is showing up as an 8% decline in the budget. Contracted services and capital equipment are showing large increases for next year. Contracted services at 55.81% increase and capital equipment at 26.02%. If you look at the detail of the budget and the actual items that are causing these increases, those items in contracted services have to do primarily with changes in special education. And so the primary increase in our budget going into next year has to do with special education costs, and I'd like to talk in a little bit more detail about that next. So here I've split cost by education type, kindergarten through 8th grade, and then high school, and I've broken out special education from those two. So in the K through 8 and high school budgets, I've included the special education for those types. So for instance, the K through 8 number that's listed there includes the special education for all the children K through 8. And the same goes for high school. And if you break out special education by itself, you can see that we have a 4.7% increase in special education costs for next year, which amounts to about $51,000. This $51,000 is 91% of the total budget increase of $56,360 for next year. So to summarize, the majority of the increase in the budget for next year is due to special education costs. So special education costs are associated with serving students with special and extraordinary needs. The services that we provide are determined by a number of factors, including state and federal regulations. This is a highly regulated area of education. And the state does reimburse the school district for a portion of our expenditures in this area. For instance, for costs up to $50,000, the reimbursement rate is currently about 56% on a per student basis. So if we had a particular student whose special education costs were $50,000, we would get approximately 56% of that money back from the state in reimbursement. For costs that are over $50,000 per student, we would get 90% of that cost back from the state. Because the needs of our students within the school can change very quickly throughout a year, special education budgeting is a very difficult thing. Service changes can be required that cost on the order of hundreds of thousands of dollars for a single student or a few students. And so we can see a very big shift in our budget and in our expenditures due to changes in our population in the special education area. The reimbursements that we get from the state are dependent upon actual spending. So we are not completely reimbursed for those expenditures until we've expended that money. The process of getting the reimbursements from the state has improved over the last couple of years, and so our ability to project our reimbursements in special education has also improved over the past few years. But it is still common for us not to receive all of those reimbursements for one fiscal year until the next fiscal year has started, and this makes budgeting pretty difficult. We take a really conservative approach to estimating the revenues or the reimbursements that we get from the state in special education spending. And if we did not do this and we had a change in our population that was pretty significant, we could easily run into a deficit spending situation because our budget is so tightly put together. We don't have a lot of excess in the budget to begin with, and so any extraordinary costs would likely cause us to deficit spend. Another question that we got last year had to do with teacher salaries, and how our teachers do with respect to other teachers in the Upper Valley and in the area. So I put together a slide which shows a comparison between Heartland teachers, the average wages of state teachers, and other schools in our area. The base category that's listed there is for people with a bachelor's degree, just starting out of college or starting in the teaching profession. And you can see there that the Heartland teachers with a base salary of $30,520 for this fiscal year that we're in is low compared to the base salary of other schools, both the average throughout the state and in local schools in our area in the Upper Valley. The master's level salary for Heartland is also lower than for other teachers in the area. And if you look at the master's high salary, so this category deserves a special note, because when the state puts out the charts that list all the salaries, they only list the highest master's salary that's listed on the school's grid. And different schools end their salary grid at different levels. And so it can be deceiving if you're looking at a salary grid that goes up to 20 years of experience versus one that goes to 25 or 30 years of experience. The master's level high salaries would be different in those cases drastically depending on the number of years of experience. One thing to note is that approximately half of all the teachers in Heartland are at or above the master's high salary level in the school right now. So that's the line there shown in the master's high column for Heartland with the asterisk there. So we have about half of our employees that are in the teaching profession that are above this level. We have very low turnover in Heartland, so we have teachers who have been in the profession for a very long time, and that's the primary reason for that. Looking at our administrative data, which is another question that was asked last year at town meeting, the question was, how do we compare with other schools in terms of the size of our administrative staff and in terms of the salary of our administrative staff? So presented here is the cohort data. So it shows how Heartland Elementary School compares to other towns that are of similar size and serve similar populations of students. So these schools that are listed here have either pre-K through 8 or K through 8 programs, and their enrollment is roughly the same as the Heartland Elementary School. This is fiscal year 2008 data, and our enrollment at that time was 327, and you can see that Rutland Town Elementary had 341 students, and Floodbank had 317. So those are the two schools closest to us in terms of population. If you move to the next column and look at total teachers, Heartland has had 38 in FY 2008. We had 2 administrators in the school. Our student-to-teacher ratio was 8.61, although I've noted down the bottom of this slide that Heartland's actual average classroom size is about 17.6 students, and that the student-to-teacher ratio includes all of the special teachers who are in the school, all of our special ed folks, music, art, guidance, health, etc. So we don't actually have 8 students in a classroom. It's closer to 17 to 18 students per class. So in looking at the comparison data between schools that are very similar to Heartland, we do have the right number of administrators for the size of our school and the student population that we serve. Our principal and superintendent and assistant principal have a lot of tasks and are very busy people and have a large staff in addition to the students, but have a large staff within the school that they need to provide leadership for as well. The salaries of our administrative office, looking at those comparison numbers here, I'm showing the principal and superintendent salaries. What's in parentheses is the number of years that each one of the principals or superintendents for the schools that are listed has in that position. For instance, in Hartford, the principal's salary is $89,239. That particular principal has been in that position for 5 years. and they lead a pre-K through 5 school with 309 students. The superintendent in the Hartford School District has been in that position for 6 years and has a salary of $109,180. And you can see by looking, 3 years? 3 years. I've just been corrected by Judy. I'll take a look at those numbers again, but Judy says 3 years for the superintendent in Hartford. Okay, so looking at the Heartland numbers, our assistant principal, the salary is $65,500. Number of years in this position is 2. We have a K through 8 school with 329 students. And in looking at the other schools that are in the area, that salary is not excessive for the number of years of experience. And in the superintendent column, the $95,000 salary with 5 years of experience is also comparable to those who are in similar positions with similar number of years experience elsewhere in our community and in the state as a whole. This year, the supervisory union, of which we are a part, the Windsor Southeast Supervisory Union, appointed a committee to look at governance structure there at the supervisory union. And the committee recommended a change in the governance structure to address a wide variety of administrative, managerial, and fiscal issues that currently exist in the supervisory union. The supervisory union board accepted the proposed change, and the model that we're moving toward is a single superintendent model. Our supervisory union was the only supervisory union in the entire state in which each district had its own superintendent. So we are moving to a model that the rest of the state has adopted, and our hope is that this will help us to solve some of the issues that we've seen at the supervisory union level. The hiring process for the new superintendent is underway, and the plan is to have this person on site at the SU by July 1st. So what will happen here in Heartland with this change? This superintendent will serve our district according to the position description that's being developed at the supervisory union level. Your local board is keenly aware of our town's desire to maintain local control and independence, and we're working very hard to ensure that those things are maintained through the position description that's being created for the superintendent's position. There are funds that are at the supervisory union level that will be used to pay for the first year of this position. So Heartland will not have to pay from its local budget for the new superintendent's position during the first year. We will still have a vice principal and principal on site, and this will mean that Judy and Scott will be spending additional time on in-house duties, things that go on within the school. And those duties may be adjusted as well as compensation depending on the outcome of the position description and hiring process of the superintendent. And we'll make those changes as they become necessary. The hope here is that we'll have increased service sharing throughout the supervisory union, greater efficiency in terms of putting together programs and serving all of the kids that are in the supervisory union, and have a more efficiently operating administrative office at the supervisory union level. Looking at trends in cost drivers, last year I pointed out that the state of Vermont is an expensive place to live, that the rate of inflation in the state of Vermont tends to be rather high in relation to the rest of the country, and that hasn't changed since last year. And the point of looking at the rate of inflation is to look at various factors in our budget, things that are changing rapidly or greater than the rate of inflation, that sort of are red flags to us in terms of trying to figure out how we can be more efficient in those areas and how we can decrease costs in those areas if we possibly can. So looking at the budget for this year, there's an increase there has been an increase of about 4.6% per year over the past few years from 2005 to 2008. And if this budget is approved for fiscal year 2010, the average would drop to about 3.6%. Inflation has been running about 4% per year and has been increasing, obviously, with the economic issues over the last couple of years. Our benefit costs have been going up about 7% a year from 2005 to 2008. But again, we saw a big reduction in some of those benefit costs this year, whereas the health insurance, which is the biggest of all of our benefits costs, was a 0% increase. So this would bring the average increase in benefits to 3.4%, which again is lower than the rate of inflation. We still see a big increase in our special education costs. The increase for fiscal year 10 is 4.7%. And special education costs have also become a much larger part of our budget, rising from 13.6% to 14.3% of the budget. So this is an area that we will be focusing on to see if we can make some changes to how the system is implemented in Heartland and at the supervisory union level to see really what's going on and how we can do things efficiently and still provide the necessary services to our students, which of course is our goal. Tuition increases have also risen greater than the rate of inflation. This year it's about a 5% average. Again, Hartford's tuition went up significantly more than that, the projected rate for next year. And again, the primary cause there is the decrease in population in those school districts is driving up the per pupil costs, which is what we pay when we tuition out a student to a high school. Okay, so the tax impact. The board voted to move $200,000 of unexpended funds from fiscal year 2008 into the general fund for the budget that's being brought before you. The intent there was to produce a 0% increase in the tax rate based on what the Ways and Means Committee has proposed as the tax rates for that fiscal year. So what this would mean for Heartland is that for residential properties, the effective tax would end up being $1.37, which is the same as what it was last year. It's possible that these rates may change. They changed last year after the budget was passed, and we have no control over how those rates are adjusted locally. So there really isn't anything that we can do about the situation except to provide you with the best information that we have at the time that we're presenting the budget to you. For example, on the left-hand side of this chart shows house site values ranging from $50,000 up to $400,000. The tax from fiscal year 09 is listed in the middle column, and then what the tax would be with the fiscal year 10 tax rate, again with the projected rates, is shown in the right-hand column. So you can see if you own a property that's $50,000 in value, you would see a $0 difference in your taxes between last year and this year. And if you had a $400,000 house, you would see a $3 difference in your taxes. This has to do with the third decimal place in the tax rate would slightly raise your taxes, but it's a pretty minimal amount. Looking at Heartland as a whole and how we stand in terms of averages, our average wage in Heartland for 2007 was $33,704. The median income for a family of 4 in 2008 was about $61,000. The median value of houses sold was about $241,950 again in 2008. And the average value of houses during that same period was $287,000. So if we take this information and then look at how your taxes are adjusted for income, which is the income sensitivity chart, we can take a look at how the average Heartland person will fare in terms of the proposed budget and the taxes that you would end up paying. The chart that's displayed here is from last year. It's for fiscal year 2009. The chart for 2010 has not been released yet from the state, and probably won't be released for some time until the legislature has a handle on what they plan to do with tax rates and so on and so forth. But this chart does illustrate the effect of income sensitivity on your education tax rate. And so if in the circle that's in the middle of the chart, it shows house values that are in the middle of Heartland's range, and also incomes that are in the middle of Heartland's range. So we're looking in the $60,000 range for average income for a family, and a house value, I think it says between 240 and 280, I think are those numbers. And if you look there at the taxes that you would pay without income sensitivity, they range between $1,800 and slightly higher than that. On the right-hand column shows you what the tax would be if there was no income sensitivity. So that range goes from about $3,300, I think, I can't see from this distance, about $3,800 on the high end. So the point here is that with Vermont's system of tax income sensitivity for education tax, if you are an average Heartland person, you pay about 50% of the education tax that you would pay without that income sensitivity. So that's a big change and a big benefit to people who are middle income or lower, people with average valued houses in the town of Vermont. Some cost-saving measures. The board over the past few years has continued to add things to the list of things to look at in terms of trying to save money in the town and be more efficient. This year we have one less bus than we've had in previous years. There were minor adjustments made to the schedule, but we were able to reduce the transportation costs significantly by reducing the number of buses by one. We have had and continue to have in the supervisory union some joint contracts, for instance, for oil and copying, and are also trying to work at having joint purchasing systems for foods for our cafeteria as well. There was a review of energy efficiency of the school by the town's ad hoc committee this year, and hopefully at town meeting someone from that committee will be there. The feedback that we got from the town's committee on energy efficiency is that the school is as energy efficient as it can be given the age of the building and the facilities that we have now. And we want to thank Mike for all his hard work in keeping us up to date in those areas. And again, one of the articles for consideration at town meeting is energy efficient lighting, which will complete the conversion to energy efficient lighting in the school this year. Also, the governance changes at the supervisory union level, those are intended to enhance joint program implementation and hopefully be more efficient in terms of providing services and also in terms of what those services will cost. So hopefully we'll see some change over the next few years with the new supervisory union structure. And also looking, again, with changes in the school's population, we've been keeping an eye on streamlining the tasking of the current staff and consolidating positions. Although no changes have been made for this budget year, the board and the administration wants the community to be aware that we're keeping an eye on things there, and we'll make changes as necessary when it becomes feasible to do so. Okay, I think that's it. If you're seeing this presentation, please note that this coming Monday is the school's annual district meeting, and we hope to see you there. If not, please come out and vote for your budget. Please send questions to the school if you have them, comments, discussion, ways of improving this presentation for next year, additional questions that you might have about the budget for next year or for this year. Please feel free to contact us. We're happy to help, and we want to continue to try to improve the process of communicating information about your school to you, and appreciate the time and energy that townspeople put into giving us feedback. So thank you.